People often say that Kate Middleton's rise from a quiet middle-class life to a key member of the British royal family is like a modern-day fairy story. Many people don't know that Carol and Michael Middleton, Kate's parents, have had hard times behind all the fame. Now Kate is finally telling the sad story of how her parents' lives have been changed by a secret story of being made fun of, having money problems, and making personal sacrifices while keeping up appearances with polite smiles. It wasn't easy for them to get where they are now, and they have mental scars that most people wouldn't expect. How much can one family handle? Carol and Michael Middleton's story doesn't begin in the fancy world of British rich people. Her family was very close, and she grew up in Southall, West London. Her dad built things, and her mom took care of the house. In Britain, where class was important, Carol got a job as a flight attendant, which was seen as an honorable but lowly job. She had no idea that this job would be criticized and brought to her attention when she became a princess. Michael Middleton's story isn't that different either. He also came from a good middle-class home. Michael was shaped a lot by the fact that his dad was a captain in the Royal Air Force. He worked as a flight controller for British Airways after school. The job let him travel, but it didn't make him look rich or important. Carol and Michael met through work in the airline business, even though they came from different backgrounds. They got married in 1980. As a young pair, they lived a simple life. They bought a simple house and soon had 3 kids: Catherine, Kate, Pippa, and James. Early on, the Middletons were not nearly as wealthy or well-known as they would become. This is when Carol's desire to start her own business really took off. After seeing a need in the market for party supplies for kids, she chose to start her own business from the family kitchen in 1987. It all began as a small party supplies mail-order business, but it quickly grew. Carol had a good sense of what families needed, and she worked hard all the time, which made the business successful. Soon, Michael started working full-time with Carol to run party pieces. Together, they grew the business and spread it across the UK. This made sure that the family had enough money to live on. They felt safer than ever before because of this business. The Middletons were able to send their children to a private school and experience what it's like to live a richer life. Carol and Michael stayed true to their middle-class roots, even though they were now very wealthy. They didn't spend a lot of money on extras and instead put their money into their kids' schooling and future. This feeling of stability set the tone for their family and helped Kate, Pippa, and James become strong, stable people. Carol and Michael changed the future of their family by working hard and not giving up. They became financially stable and moved up in the company. They did great things, but behind it all was a less well-known story of sorrow and inherited wealth. The family's financial security was helped by a trust fund from Carol's side. This fund had a sad and important history. The Middletons used this trust fund as a safety net in the end, but it came with a terrible cost that followed them around. Carol and Michael's success rose, but the fact that they were from the middle class caused problems, especially in the upper classes of British society and in the aristocratic circles around Prince William. Even though the Middletons became wealthy, critics couldn't get past the fact that they came from a working-class background. People from all walks of life in Britain had mixed feelings about the Middletons' past as they rose through the ranks. One of the hardest things for them was dealing with Prince William's friends. His friends were from noble families that had been around for a long time and had strong ideas about class and custom. They saw the Middletons as outsiders because they didn't have the royal family background or social class that they thought was needed to join the royal family. Because of this, rude and insulting comments were made, usually about Carol. One very well-known nickname, Doors to Manuel, made fun of her job as a flight attendant, implying that her job made her unfit for royal ties. Some of William's friends are said to have come up with the nickname, which showed how prejudiced some upper-class people are still. Even worse, the media kept talking about Carol's time as a flight attendant, which didn't help. They often made her look like an ambitious social climber who was obsessed with getting her family into the royal group. Even though Party Pieces was a big hit and the band was now financially stable, the press focused on her old job as a sign of how lowly she was thought to be. Even though the Middletons were criticized, there was a wave of public respect for them. In Britain, a lot of people saw their story as a great example of how to get ahead and succeed through hard work. Many people related to Carol and Michael's story because they admired their hard work and drive in a time when people valued merit and ambition over family ties. Some people saw the Middletons as the perfect example of modern Britain because they were a family that got where they were by working hard and being smart, not because they were royal. When Kate's friendship with Prince William became public, this love only grew. Kate was a welcome and understandable addition to the royal family for many. Still, there were some rough spots in the shift. The Middletons often had to find a balance between the values of their middle-class background and the customs of the upper class. This split was especially clear when Britain's upper class got together, and it showed how hard it was for them to live in two very different worlds at the same time. Aristocrats, who were used to staying away from business deals, were often suspicious of Carol's behavior and the fact that she was so involved with party pieces. Many people in these groups didn't like the idea of working for their money, even if it meant running a successful business. It went against the old money values they held dear. Michael, on the other hand, got poked less in public because he was more shy. His family had been around for a longer time, so he was seen as a bit more acceptable by the upper class. The differences between the Middletons and the aristocrats who were around Prince William and Kate showed a deeper cultural split that has been a problem in Britain for hundreds of years. Carol and Michael had a lot of success, but people still saw them through the lens of how poor they were at first, and it was hard to change that view. The steady attention from the media made these problems based on class even worse. The press liked making the Middletons look like outsiders, and were always criticizing Carol's goals and guessing what she was really trying to do. The paparazzi never stopped taking pictures of the family, both at events and in their daily lives. They often used these pictures to fuel stories that said the family was trying to get into royal groups. Some people even said Carol had spoofed Kate's relationship with William, so that it looked like a planned social move instead of a real love story. This picture was not only wrong, but it was also painful for the Middletons, who cared about their privacy and modesty. It made the stress they were already under, as they tried to find their place in high society, even worse. The Middletons were the first family with real middle-class roots to have a member marry a future king. This caused a lot of debate about who should really be in royal circles and what part class should play in that decision. For traditionalists, the Middletons' rise was an invasion that tainted the purity of aristocratic history. For some, though, their journey meant the start of a new era of acceptance and progress, one in which a person's background was less important than their beliefs, character, and work ethic. As people judged Carol and Michael, they kept their heads up. But the constant attention started to wear them down. Because they knew that any mistake could be reported by the media, the family became more and more careful. Their careful method helped them keep their privacy, but it also made things more tense in royal circles. A lot of people watched every move they made, no matter how small. It got harder to handle being famous because the line between their private lives and public lives became less clear. But the media's constant attention wasn't going to stop. Soon, the tabloids stopped making fun of them and started actually invading their privacy. People often think that the Middleton family's wealth is due to their hard work, but there is also a sad story behind it. This family wealth goes back to Francis Martino Lupton, who was Kate Middleton's great-great-grandfather. He was a wealthy farmer and businessman from Leeds who had made a lot of money. Francis was going to leave his money to his 5 children, but World War I would change his family's future and the Middleton family's finances in a big way. Francis Lupton was an ambitious man who owned buildings and ran a number of businesses that helped his family's finances. He had 4 children, 3 sons and 2 girls. He was excited to give them some of his money. Things changed, though, when World War I started. Francis had 3 sons: Francis, Ashford, Maurice, and Lionel. Like many young men at the time, they joined the British troops. It's too bad that none of them came back. The loss of all 3 kids in the line of duty was terrible for the Lupton family. Francis had no more boys to leave his estate to, so his 2 daughters, Olive and Anne, were the only ones left. People said Francis would never be the same after losing his boys. Even though it was sad, Olive and Anne were surprised to inherit their father's wealth. Neither of them had expected this to happen, but they both gladly took on the part. These people received a large estate that is now worth more than $2 million. It had been many generations since the sad deaths of the Lupton sons by the time the estate got to Carol and Michael Middleton. The family's wealth, on the other hand, was greatly affected by their sad past. This extra money gave Carol and Michael the ability to take care of their family and put money into their kids' futures. It helped them start Party Pieces, their family business, and send Kate and her brothers to good boarding schools. Because of the Lupton Trust Fund, Kate was able to take advantage of chances that led her to the British royal family. However, the real sources of this wealth were hidden under layers of public perception, even though it brought stability. The money made their lives better, but it also brought unwanted attention to them. The Middletons were often painted in the media as social climbers who were obsessed with getting good marriages and money. However, people who knew about the Lupton family's past saw a lot more layers to the story. There was more to the trust fund than just an inheritance. It was a tragedy-born gift given so that others could find security in a world that had taken so much from them. This past was well known to Carol and Michael, and they took pride in their success while also being aware of what others had given up to make these chances possible. They became more connected with the royal family, though, and this more complicated story was often forgotten. Instead, the news focused on Carol's job as a flight attendant and Michael's job as a flight operator, ignoring how their inheritance made them feel. People ignored the sad past of the Lupton Trust Fund in favor of a simpler story. They said the Middletons were just trying to get ahead in life. This basic account left out a lot of the Middleton family's complicated history. It didn't take into account the many factors that had led to their success. This forgotten past became even more important as they became more connected to the royal family. You can't deny that the fortune helped them become financially stable, but they also worked hard to get there. This mix of sadness and happiness set the stage for their future, shaped the lives of their children, and made it possible for Kate to join the royal family. The Middletons had a hard time getting away from the steady attention of the media and public ridicule. A lot of the tabloid stories were about Carol, and they often made fun of her drive and confidence. The media portrayed Carol as a stereotypical social climber instead of focusing on the real bond between the Middleton family or Kate's relationship with William. Even though there was no real evidence to support such claims, they made it sound like she was gaming the system. In the press, Carol's time as a flight attendant was often brought up as if it were something to be ashamed of. When her work experience came up, it was always used as an attack on her character. People who didn't like her seemed to use it as a memory of her ordinary upbringing, saying it wasn't as fancy as the upbringings that royal families usually have. They didn't care that Carol had worked hard to start a business from scratch. They didn't praise her for being strong. Instead, they used her old job to make fun of her and ask if she was fit to be in high society. On the other hand, Michael Middleton was generally shown as the quieter, less outgoing partner of Carol's outgoing personality. Even though he seemed inactive because he was more laid back, the media still saw him as part of a family that was eager to move up the social ladder. The way the Middletons were portrayed as social climbers didn't take into account their real accomplishments, or the fact that hard work and moving up in society are valued in modern Britain. The Middletons were hurt by how badly the press wrote about them. All of a sudden, everything they said and did was looked at with suspicion. Family members other than Carol and Michael were also affected. They were all talked about in tabloids. People said mean things about Kate's sister Pippa, and even Kate's brother James was the target of mean rumors. The media even called Carol's parenting style into question, saying she was too controlling and involved in Kate's life too much, even after she married into the royal family. Even though these stories were often grossly overblown or made up, they still made Carol a laughingstock. When Netflix's The Crown came out, these problems got even worse because the show made up parts of Carol's life to make them more dramatic. The show was known for mixing real events with made-up stories, which affected how people thought about the Middletons in ways that weren't always true. Carol was presented in The Crown as a mother who was very interested in making sure her daughter would become a member of the royal family. It was clear that the character was exaggerated for entertainment purposes, but this only made people more sure of what they thought Carol's goals and plans were. For viewers who didn't know the real story of the Middletons, Carol's figure on the show became the main thing they thought about. The problem is that this made-up version of her only made people think less of her. The Crown was another thing that Carol and Michael saw that made them think of how their lives had been affected by a picture they could never fully change. The over-the-top portrayal of Carol made the family's problems even worse and confirmed the stereotypes they'd been trying to avoid for a long time. Now, they weren't just fighting against tabloid stories. They were also fighting against how people around the world saw them because of a very famous TV show that blurred the lines between fact and fiction. This was made even worse by the media hacking scandal in the early 2000s, which showed how far the British press would go to invade people's privacy. The Middletons and Prince William were picked as direct targets by the hackers. Carol's phone was tapped many times, and reporters eager for a juicy story read her voicemails and private messages. Conversations that were supposed to be private, often with her family, were made public so that other people could use them against her. This scandal wasn't just about making news, it was a total invasion of their privacy. Carol began to wonder who she could trust and where the lines between her personal and professional life were. The attack hurt Catherine the most because she was still seeing Prince William at the time. It was all over the tabloids that she talked to her mother about her friendship with William, upcoming family events, and other private things. It put even more stress on Kate, who was already being closely watched by the public, making things even worse. Kate Middleton had to deal with her changing role in the royal family and the growing attention from the public. The hacking scandal had effects that went beyond her. Prince William was also very moved. As a child, he was constantly watched by the media, which made him very protective of his private life and the people he loved. The scandal, which showed how much the press had listened in on his private talks with Kate and her family, made him distrust the media even more than before. That made him even more determined to protect Kate and her family from more privacy invasions like that in the future. As the scandal got worse, it became harder for the Middleton family to enjoy family traditions like holidays, because they were so stressed out and angry about it. They were afraid to talk about private things because they thought the press might twist them. These problems added to the emotional stress that the Middleton family was already feeling, because their youngest son, James, was having mental health problems. James Middleton bravely told the world in 2019 that he had been dealing with serious depression for years. He said that his sadness was like a cancer of the mind, and it kept him from connecting with even the people closest to him. Watching their son go through such deep darkness was heartbreaking for Carol and Michael. When James was honest about his mental health problems, it showed how close he was to his family, especially his sisters and Kate, who were always there for him when he needed help. Carol and Michael gave James all the love and support they could, but it broke their hearts to see him in so much pain. Their love for their son showed them how little they could do to help him, which is a hard thing for any parent to realize. Even though the situation was hard on everyone, it only made the Middleton family stronger. The fight James had with sadness not only affected his family, but also had a bigger impact on the world. The Middletons went through hard times together, but they did so with love, understanding, and strength. This showed how important it is to raise awareness about mental health, a cause that would later touch many people. Kate Middleton's health problems made things even more stressful for the Middleton family, who were already having a hard time. Because they were parents, Carol and Michael naturally wanted to protect Kate from the stress of her royal responsibilities. But they also knew that Kate's job as a member of the royal family didn't leave her much time for alone time or privacy. Kate's health problems caused a lot of worry for her family, who had already been through a lot of personal and work problems. Carol was especially torn because she wanted to protect Kate, but also knew that her daughter was often thrust into the public eye and didn't have much say over her own story. Whatever Kate's health problem was, it was a constant problem in a life that was already being watched closely. Carol and Michael had to find a hard way to support their daughter while also honoring her role as a future queen consort. This put their protective instincts to the test. Even though Kate kept doing her royal duties, her family's worries about her health showed how being in the public eye could hurt someone emotionally. Carol and Michael were always there for their family, even when they were having problems with their business or losing a loved one. They were always there for Kate and for each other, even when the pressures and demands of public life and personal problems changed. When things went wrong, the Middleton family was strong and had strong family ties. These things helped them get through the hard times, even though their story was getting more and more attention from the public. The Middleton family's true strength was shown during this time of health problems, business losses, and other stresses. Even though they were going through hard times, they stayed together and relied on their strong values of love, loyalty, and strength, which had helped them all along the way, before and after Kate became a princess. Many of the ways that the Middletons are portrayed as social climbers are more a result of media greed than a true reflection of their lives. It's easy to believe the story of their ascent and ambition, especially when they are under a lot of media criticism. However, this version of their story doesn't show how complicated their journey really was. The Middletons' rise to fame, especially Carol's work building the family business and giving her kids chances, shows how hard people can work and not give up. Not just to move up the social ladder, Carol and Michael Middleton worked hard to make their home a stable and loving place for their family. People who talk about social climbing often don't talk about the things they gave up to build their business or the problems they faced, like losing money and loved ones. A lot of the time, gossip stories don't talk about how strong and united the Middleton family was emotionally. Even though there were pressures from outside, they stayed strong for each other, with Carol being the mental anchor. The family's strong bonds and unwavering loyalty to each other stood out as their real legacy. This is very different from how the media often shows families in a simple, one-dimensional way. What really happened is that they didn't give up, they kept going. They did become royal, but not because they were trying to move up the social ladder. Instead, they did it because they were a hard-working, close-knit family figuring out how to live in a world full of problems. People in the media have a tendency to oversimplify them by saying they are manipulative or only interested in getting ahead. This doesn't show how strong they really are, both as a family and as people. The Middleton family story shows how determination, love, and a strong sense of duty can help people get through hard times, like money problems and even being made fun of by others. These are the values that have always been at the heart of their story.